Hello, hello, and welcome to the All In podcast with Nate Peo. Of course, I'm your host, Nate Peo. Today, I'm joined with the one and only Duron, right? He served 8 years in the Marine Corps, developed a formal leadership program for young Marines to learn leadership skills so they're prepared when they get promoted. He's also an advisory board member for the Kansas City Esports Coalition, competed in a League of Legends for Park University Esports Supplies Collegiate Esport advisory, educating non-authentic gamers on how to create authentic gaming experiences and providing the solutions to do so. Welcome to the show. How are you doing, man?
Good, man. Yeah, I appreciate you, Nate, for having me on.
No, very cool to come on. So like we were chatting before we started recording that you're the first esports person I've ever really chatted with. And I was kind of like, hey, what is esports? And what's like, it's like, I know there's big money behind it. I know that there's like famous gamers that making millions of bucks. And I know it's Stitches, but I've never been on Stitch. And I may have said that word. I don't even know if it's the right platform,
Twitch.
but Twitch.
Yeah.
But what can you kind of, give a little insight onto what is esports and how did you get plugged into that?
Yeah, so esports is not what everybody thinks it's just video games, right? It's a little bit more, think of like your traditional stick and ball sports, right? You learn teamwork, communication, leadership, uh, team building and whatnot, all of that, right? It's very inclusive. Esports is kind of similar to that aspect to where it's you learn those intangible skills, but through competition, right? People still gamers nowadays still don't understand what esports is. They just hear esports and like, oh, it's video games. Like, no, it's not. It's competition at a higher level. The guys that actually compete and spend the same amount of time that a traditional player would, like in football, baseball, or anything else, are the same hour that they're spending playing on their skill set on playing a video game, right? And some people might not understand that, but it takes a lot of hand-eye coordination, a lot of attention and detail, a lot of uh, reaction, split-second reaction, decision making uh, to play at a really high caliber level. And you can, if that can be harnessed, right, to basically teach a kid how to be a better person in the real world when they get a job, apart from me playing esports. Um, so that's kind of where I came in, right? I played it at the college level after the Marine Corps. I served in the Marine Corps for 8 years, right? I fell in love with leadership. I wasn't really a very talented athlete. I played sports, but I just wasn't that good, right? I didn't make it to the pros. I didn't get to go to college. And so I was like, man, I just don't fit in. And I knew college wasn't going to be the thing for me. So I was like, well, I might as well just join the military. Luckily, I picked the Marine Corps out of all the branches because they really harp on leadership, especially at a younger age. Like that's what they do, right? Luckily, I had really good mentors and leaders throughout my career in the Marine Corps, and they turned me into a completely different person. And I kind of fell in love with that aspect of mentoring and guidance, and how that can turn a person that never really had aspirations or ambitions into a machine that can do that. Like you're basically training yourself to do that, right, with the right people guiding you. And so after I got out of the Marine Corps, I had the opportunity to, the VA was going to pay for my schooling. So I was like, all right, well, let me see what schools are out there. And Park University just has a really good relationship with military members, right? And they had an esports program, a brand new esports program. I was like, well, I mean, I did play video games when I was in the Marine Corps. Let me try this out. And luckily, I got a scholarship to play. And I was literally the oldest guy on the team, so they called me granddad, right, on the team. Everybody else was young, really young, early 20s. I'm the only one that was 30 years old playing video games with them. And I quickly realized that the players that we had they were gamers, not competitors. You had your onesies and twosies that were very high caliber players, but they just didn't. The rest of everybody else, they didn't understand what it took to actually be a very competitive player. And so I played for the year. I kind of just wanted to see like how it actually worked from a student's perspective. And I got out of that and I got introduced to another organization that they help colleges build out facilities. And so they indoctrinated me into their organization to basically be a collegiate esports advisor to advise colleges on how to recruit players at a higher level. And so that's kind of how I got started into this bad boy.
Well, that's interesting. There's a couple of things I wanted to ask you about. So, first is kind of simple. Like, what game were you playing that you get a scholarship for? Like, what specific games do you play? And is it like
So
is it on PlayStation, or is it like on a computer, like with the keyboard? Like,
no, it's on a computer.
okay.
And you have to play with like high caliber computers. Like you can't really PlayStations and Xboxes are all right, but they don't perform. You're not going to perform as well as if you have a computer, right? They're
Mhm.
just a better machine, less lag time. The response rates on everything is so much faster on the computer. And so the game that I played was League of Legends. It's a 5-on-5 uh, team-based game where you just basically try to take out objectives and beat the other team by first one to beat an objective.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So you were mentioning that a lot of the kids they were gamers, right? So they're good at playing the video game, but they lacked what it meant to be competitors, and I'm guessing
Right.
they also lack some of the leadership. So what is that difference between being a competitor, being a gamer, to being a competitor and instilling leadership? And what were those lessons that you kind of started to instill in those teammates of yours, and how did that turn into better performance?
Yeah, I mean, first things first, right? I'm very militaristic and very um, systematic about things. A lot of gamers don't work out naturally, and I love to work out. So first thing I did was implement a workout schedule for these guys, and it's cool because like they have access. They're considered athletes, right? So they had access to the athletic department's gym, which was awesome, right? It's fully decked out with everything you need for working out. And these guys never worked out once in their life, right? So they actually had somebody that knew how to work out and got to show them how to actually move their bodies and how their mechanics works. And a lot of them started liking it, right? And some of them didn't like it so much because they're like kind of voluntold to do it. But it was ultimately always for their benefit, right? We actually had a lot of the athletic directors that were in there, the trainers that would always say that the esports team was always the most present at the gym than any other program that they had there. So that kind of made me feel pretty good about that. But that was the first phase, right? Getting them involved into the gym, getting them on a structure like that, and then from there transitioning over to identifying who are the better players and who can actually lead, right? So kind of letting them, and again, I'm still a player at this moment, so I'm still one of their peers, but just you can still guide them in the right direction by just talking to them and kind of giving them hints. Hey, you might want to do this, man. You might want to talk to the coach like this. In the meantime, also coaching the coach,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because in esports right now, and they're getting better, a lot of universities are starting to pick up on this, is how to recruit for a head coach. The criteria to be a head coach right now, it can literally be anybody that knows what esports is, right? It's easy to fool someone that doesn't know what something is and how to get recruited into that. And so I had like a kind of like an internal desire just to help her, our coach out, and just kind of guide her on how to coach. She's never been a coach before, right? So it's kind of working through that challenging dynamic of being able to correct people. She's never had to do anything like that, having to speak up and whatnot. And it's been a very fun experience, I would say, just because I'm used to the Marines where you can just tell them what to do and they'll do it, right? And then college students don't have to do that. They'll just be like, no. Especially
Well,
gamers that have no idea.
yeah, it's interesting no matter like where you're at in like leadership, like you know what you know, but you don't always realize what everybody else doesn't know until like you're coming up through the Marines, right? And I
Right.
wasn't a Marine, so I can't say I know this as well as you do, but like y'all start at the same place, right? You're all just first, recruits right off the bus first day, and you get like pushed into it. So everybody's learning it at the same pace and the same level and the same expectations. And like, hey, if I'm expected to do this, everybody else is expected to do the same thing. But then you
Right.
go into a different circumstance where the people you're interacting with on your team doesn't have that level of training in the same capacity. Now you have to like take what you've learned and really like take steps back, because you probably were like light years ahead of them to, oh, just do this real quick. They're like, we don't even know what you're talking about, man. Like, you
Right.
got
And I mean, the thing about leadership is also knowing how to communicate with them, right? Since I knew the game, we kind of use that as a easy way to break the barrier, right? You can use I use a lot of scenarios that I would like in my normal Marine Corps life, right? Compared to like the gaming world, right? You have objectives, you have a mission, you got to overcome these objectives to reach that mission and complete the task that you're given. Same systematic approach to that, and just giving everybody like I'm a big believer in decentralized leadership, right? Giving everybody else the ability to delegate, or I delegate, and that they do it themselves, and give them that benefit of the doubt that they can actually do it, as long as you give them like clear and concise orders. And then most of the times, it wasn't even a fact of like them. A lot of it was like them having to relearn the game. Because again, they're really good at the games by themselves, but being in a team atmosphere, being able to communicate with each other, that's something that everybody had to relearn how to do. Because again, when you're playing as a kid, when you're playing, esports is a known thing. You're playing with friends.
mm-hmm.
And most of the times, if you're not very competitive, you're just doing it for fun. It's not like you can communicate with your friends like, hey, and be very strategical about how you're going to do certain things. It's just kind of like, hey, we're just having fun, right? And then now being thrown into a world where you have to do that, a lot of the challenges was just trying to get them to communicate with each other, just talk.
Yeah.
And then I would say that was the biggest hurdle, is getting them to actually talk to each other in a team-like manner.
Yeah. So I was just kind of like thinking through this as you were talking, and I was kind of like envisioning somebody that like could be in any sport, right? And they're playing coming up through high school. They're probably like really good, in their high school. They can run circles around the people that they play with, and then they go into a higher level of competition, and all of a sudden like everybody's at least as good as them and not better, and they're not really prepared to step up to that higher level of expectation. So I mean, is that kind of like how it's going? And then the other thing I was thinking about was like, is there like pressure on from the school to the kids, like, hey, you guys got to win, like what are you doing? Or is it just kind of like hey, whatever, we're getting paid to be gamers, but like, is there the
So the
pressure from
pressure's
the
not
school?
really the pressure doesn't really go onto the kids as much. I guess it depends on what college you're talking to, right? Some of our clients, they do put the pressure on the kids, especially because scholarships are now handed out, and I mean you're basically getting paid at your job, right? Apart from having high grades, but a lot of the pressure goes onto the coach and the directors. Right now in the era that we're in, and how infant college esports is, a lot of the coaches are being recruited as head coaches are their titles, but they're actually directors. Mm-hmm. And you got to think, like, if you have an athletic director in a college, and that person's in charge of also coaching like 4 different sports, like football, soccer, baseball, that's the equivalent as to like how a lot of like colleges are seeing it right now. Like, hey, well, it's video games. One coach is sufficient to coach 4 different titles. Mm-hmm. But each different title has their own specific team, their own specific rule set, their own specific scheduling and everything, right? Different conferences that they can join and whatnot, different equipment, different play style, different everything, right? And so right now, the way that everybody's just recruiting is just doing that. And even I have a few clients right now that have 300 plus students in their program, but the cost still doesn't see it as it's like an opportunity for them to actually systematically just hire a head coach for this position, for this title, head coach for this title. Right now they just have actually this school has a student, it's a student ran, what are they called? GAs? Mm-hmm. Yep. They have a GA running the program where like it's a part-time student as the director of it all.
Crazy.
And they're killing it. They're doing a really good job of setting it up because again, if you're kind of giving that responsibility to the kid that really cares about it, and he's stepping up to be like, oh, well, hey, you have this responsibility, you have this responsibility. They kind of came up with it themselves, which I give them like big kudos to them, because most colleges aren't like that, even with a director in house that's being paid a salary.
Yeah. So this topic is just fascinating to me because like I grew up in an era where people like, hey, don't play video games, like that's
Yeah.
like it's not productive use of your time, and here you are getting paid to do video games. So I usually like to ask my guests this question earlier in the show, but it kind of led it to be right now, which is, do you think you're lucky? What's your thoughts on luck?
I don't. I know when you sent me this question, I was like, I have like mixed feelings about the word luck, right? I mean, I do believe in manifestation, right? You can manifest things into reality. When I was a kid, I used to tell myself like, man, it'd be so cool to get paid to play video games. And I really believed it. I was like, man, I would love to do that. But again, I wasn't a very good gamer, right? So it was like, not for me. Not, it wasn't in the cards for me.
Uh-huh.
But when it comes to luck, I think if you position yourself right and you work hard at it and you actually systematically just get to a position where it's like a no-brainer, things are just going to happen to you, right? It's like everything just flows. Everything just flows right for you. But I don't. So I guess to answer that question, I really don't believe in luck. It's you have to put a lot of work, and I think when people see luck, they miss out on the actual work that person has been putting on, right? Whether it's in a form of doing good deeds or whatever, and it just automatically just came out with a big lump sum of a lot of cash. If somebody wins the lottery, I don't know. That could be considered luck, but when it comes to like things that happen for someone's life like this, I think it's just work, really.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting take because a lot of luck is circumstances that happen to you and then like what you do with those opportunities. So
Yeah.
like luck is like, hey, you were born in an era where, esports is actually a thing. If you'd have born 20, 30 years before, like you probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to do it.
Right.
But at the same time, you were born in the right era, but if you didn't do anything about it, like you wouldn't have been involved. So you still have to work at it. You still have to be the best at what you do to capitalize on those opportunities. So I think it's very interesting, like your take on that. So, um, you were mentioning that there's a lot of students involved. How big is esports within the college? Is it just starting? Like, what's the future look like for it?
It is. It is. And it's getting bigger by the week, right? Right now, there's organizations that are starting esports in middle schools.
Hmm.
And so, and I think that's good just because like right now, the players that are coming into collegiate esports, it's more gamers, right? They don't understand those concepts. But the earlier we can touch the kids into like teaching them how teamwork works and whatnot, those skills will get developed and more refined. So by the time they're college, they already know what to do. They already know how to communicate with people. They already know how to play the game in a different manner, which in turn will flip around and help the professional scene with higher caliber players. Um, right now in esports, it's kind of like the wild wild west. You can have as soon as you're 13, you're eligible to be a pro gamer. Just because you have the ability to stream, get your content out there, and that's like the minimum age that, like for example, Twitch, right? You have to be at least 13 years old to stream your stuff and throw your stuff out there to the world. Um, so you can be really popular by the time you're at the age to go to college, and you're a super huge gamer. Some of the colleges recruit pro gamers because pro gamers usually retire at 23. So I mean, and these organizations, like if you're a pro gamer, you're basically you have a salary, you have all benefits covered, right? And sometimes your salary is like six figures, like you're an athlete. And so by the time you get out of that, colleges will pay you to go to their school to represent them, to go to school. They'll give you a full ride scholarship, just represent us and win some tournaments. I'm like, all right.
So six figures at 13, your full ride to college, and then you go off and get a job probably working in the gaming industry, designing stuff and get paid a ton of money too. So,
Yeah,
man, first
it's a crazy
it's
cycle.
getting plugged in pretty young and pretty easy. So, This is just so fascinating. Like to be, it must be for you to be involved with it, but just to see it from the outside, it just seems unreal. Do you get a lot of crap from friends and family when you tell them what you do?
No, no, they're actually really surprised. Like when I first told my parents, they were just like, "You." I don't think my dad understood what I did, so he's like, "Is it that big?" And I was like, "Well," and he likes it. He loves the Chiefs, right? So I was like, "Well, I mean, we're working on a project with some NFL teams," and he's like, "What?" And I think at that moment when he heard that, he's like, "What? You do what?" He's like, "Yeah, like they're wanting to get involved in the esports. They want to have their own esports teams too, and why not? You know?" And so,
Yeah,
so
very
it's pretty.
cool.
Yeah, it's a pretty fun subject for everybody else, I guess,
All
to
right.
mention.
So I got to ask you, ask this of all my guests. What does it mean for you, or what does it mean to you to be all in on an idea or an outcome?
All in, I really do think you have to have full faith and confidence in yourself to just pick something and just go for it. I mean, I would have never, if you would have told me 5 years ago though, that I was going to be in the esports world, I probably would have been like, nah, that's not possible. You know, that's not a real thing. I'm not a gamer like that. I didn't play video games back then. Um, but it just like that opportunity showed up and I was like, all right, I'm doing this. I'm going all in. Like making the choice of going to college and playing for a varsity esports team at 30 years old when I'm literally the oldest person I know in esports on the collegiate level. And so, I mean, just dedicating that time in there and then finding your niche and just believing in yourself to go 110% and drinking the Kool-Aid and thinking that you can actually do it, make a change in the world.
Yeah, awesome stuff. You must have felt like a fish out of water. Probably you're in shape, fit, old and washed up at 30. I'm just kidding because I'm in my 40s and it's definitely like not old at all. And you know, you went to the military. These are like young college kids that are the opposite. So very cool to get plugged in. Um, so let's talk about maybe a little bit about what you are specifically doing, who you help out, and like, you know, who you're trying to connect with.
Yeah, so my job specifically, what I do is talk to athletic administrations, right, from colleges and universities. And my biggest thing is just trying to talk to them and have them understand that esports can be a component for them to have more students engage and make them feel more inclusive, right? And also create more like and honestly just increase the bottom line for them. Like a lot of colleges right now, especially because of COVID, they canceled a lot of their fall sports. So that's going to be a big revenue downer for them. So esports is an awesome alternative because a lot of the players that already played sports, right, or just your general population in schools do play video games, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just an easy transition into that to kind of get some income coming in that normally you'd be missing out because of COVID. And so anybody that's in the higher education space that I can talk to, that I can uh, either have a conversation and help them make an educated decision as to whether or not an esports program is a good fit for them in their schools.
Very cool. Very cool. So where can somebody go if they want to get connected to you?
My LinkedIn's probably the easiest way. I think Cesar Duron, right on there. Um, and then, I mean, send me an email, duron@esportsupply.com.
Awesome. So I'll list all those links in the show notes so you can reach out. And if you do reach out to Duron, make sure you say hello. Let him know you heard about him on the All In podcast with Nate Pale. And I encourage you to reach out and connect. It's always important to grow your network because you never know who you're going to meet and what you might get exposed to. Maybe you can go get a scholarship, play esports, or
That's right.
get plugged in. So awesome, man. Thanks for coming on the show. Had a great time chatting with you.
I appreciate it. Hey, thanks for having me on, man.
Thank you.